Explain the amendments. The committee's got any questions on the commitments? Committee's got any questions on the amendments? We'll take that up. And then we'll move on from there.
Yes, so what you have before you should all have a copy of the amendments. Worked with Representative Bolton on these and with ALEA and law enforcement. And so it's just kind of some cleanup language where we make sure that on the reporting side, we streamline the reporting that agencies are already doing with ALEA on an annual basis and not have to burden ALEA with creating other reporting requirements while still allowing the local agencies to do quarterly local reports on their website or get that out to their communities. And then on the enforcement side, we wanted to make sure that the enforcement of this was left up to in-house local agency policies and that they didn't potentially lose funding. And so that amendment does that. And then also, if they didn't have access to an interpreter, that make it not shall, but that they would just make a good faith effort to do the best they could to provide an interpreter. And then because we're removing the potential financial loss of money for noncompliance and leaving that to internal agencies, just that the AG would report that to the governor and would also make that public information as well.
All right, go ahead and take your amendment, go line by line.
All right, so we're replacing lines 44 through 61 on page 2 and 3 with the following nationals. We're replacing lines 80 through 86.
Oh, hold on, go back.
I'm sorry, all right.
And give the committee a chance to digest it. Replace lines 44 through 61.
With the word national, with 61 with national, so that whole section there of 45 to 54 is gone.
Hold on.
And that's, okay.
So we're deleting 44 through 61.
Or 45 through, but yes,
Well, it says
45 through 61. It keeps the word nationals,
All right.
and then it just, the rest of that is gone because of the removal of the financial penalty.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, and then on lines 80 through 86, I'll turn there. So lines 80 through 86, and so that replaces it there. Let's see, here we go.
So we're placing lines 80 through 86 on page 3 and 4 with the following.
With the following, that's right. Which
Go ahead and read it.
Okay, and so we're replacing it with this: immigration detainer request in certain circumstances, and to require county and municipal jails to prepare and report information regarding foreign nationals. So what this does is it says, hey, we're not requiring quarterly reports to ALEA. It's going to be an annual report to ALEA, which is what ALEA worked with us to agree on.
All right, go ahead. Lines 163 through 70.
Yes, sir. So let me turn there. So lines 163 through 170 there. Replacing those on page 6 and 7 with the following. And so shall report the violation to the governor and shall issue a press release containing the details of the violation. So this is because we're removing the potential loss of grant money. So instead of reporting it to the comptroller, it's just the governor and then the AG can make that information public.
Okay.
And then lines 182 and 183, we're replacing it with the following, which is jail staff and an inmate as a result of language barriers, reasonable effort shall be made to bring in an interpreter. This is just removing that they shall to reasonable effort in case they don't have access to an interpreter. And then on replace line 195 on page 7. This is just the concern was that the wording of the bill was telling one federal agency what to do with another, so it's just shall request less to notify ICE. And then removing on lines on page 10, lines 266 through 270. Those were just removed to allow the agencies to handle the violation of this in-house based on whatever the local agency's policies are. And then lines 291 through 292, page 11. All right, so and this has to do with replacing lines 291 through 292, and that just makes it where the quarterly reports on the website are just the local agencies as opposed to ALEA. And then you'll see on the end here where we add on about the annual report to ALEA, which we'll get to that in a second. But this just makes the quarterly part the state, county, and local jails on their local websites. And then lines 315 through 322 on page 12. That's the last one here. And that's where we replace those lines with the following. So starting there on line 315, compliance with all applicable laws stays the same. And then it adds in B, which is a state, county, or local jail shall annually provide the information in subsection A to the Alabama State Law Enforcement Agency. So that just says, hey, we're going to do the annual report just like they're already doing to streamline it, which was ALEA's request.
Okay. All right, any questions from members of the committee? Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Go back to the interpretation amendment again.
About applying an interpreter?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Now, would you?
Well, the original bill said that they shall supply.
Why they shall not? Why they shall not? They shall have the same. We should put everything up front. These people should have the same opportunity to have someone to understand their language. So if we can't say we can't find an interpreter, you're trying to tell me that we can't find a person that interpret Spanish?
Well, no, that's why the original bill said that they shall provide an interpreter.
Well, they shall.
But the concern was that if there was a local agency that didn't have one or is having a hard time, at least that they have to make a reasonable effort. That was the compromise that was made.
To make an effort. I think that shall should. I think shall should continue to be, because sometimes our efforts are not reasonable enough.
That was in my original bill, was to shall.
What's your nationality?
American.
We all, when we come here, we are all Americans, but you have any ethnicity other than American?
I mean, I've in my ancestry, yes.
Okay, so could you tell me what they are?
I have Cherokee.
Cherokee, that's Indian, huh?
That's right, Indian, yeah. And then obviously I've got Caucasian.
Okay, so let me see. You don't have to ask that question to me because you know what I am. And so it's been so much misinformation, been so much discrimination, been so much abuse of people that is not, like you said, Caucasian. So if a person is incarcerated and we're not providing them a mechanism of communication, then we're not doing our job as law enforcement officers. Just to say I'm on the streets and I speak a different language than the officer, I'm going to be abused because I don't understand nothing he's saying. So it shall be that someone would provide a method of communication for those people.
I have no problem returning to the original language on that part of the bill.
Thank you so much for wanting to keep that, because we're America, and this democracy works when we work together with it.
The desire and intent of that original language was to address that very issue.
Thank you so much.
All right, Representative Betzel.
Yeah, and I respect what my colleague here has mentioned on the shall piece of an interpreter. I can just speak firsthand experience. Let me ask you this. In your bill, are we only referring to people of Hispanic immigration? Anyone who has immigrated to this country illegally and they're Hispanic? Or is that the only people we're talking about?
No.
So this could be anybody from anywhere in the world?
That's right.
So let's say we had somebody who spoke Mandarin Chinese.
Sure.
Okay, so we have had that occasion to have a Mandarin Chinese individual in our custody before. And it wasn't just that he was Mandarin Chinese, it was that he was from an extremely rare dialect of Mandarin Chinese. Sure. So to impose such a restriction and say shall have an interpreter when the interpreter may frankly just not be possible, that is a certain burden on law enforcement that would put us in a position where you have to do something that is impossible and bind them to something that would be violating the law despite their best efforts. And if we go even beyond reasonable efforts, which we did, we could not find an interpreter for this individual. So I just have to disagree respectfully there, because we're not just talking about, I think any one of us would be grateful and can, and even in our own ranks, have people who speak Spanish to be able to communicate. So that's not a problem. I think my fear comes with those people who do not speak, or speak such a rare dialect that it's just physically impossible to find an interpreter.
And that's why on this amendment, on that part, I deferred to law enforcement, because that was their request, because of the scenario, of the situations where you brought up that there are things that happen that, you know, are not in the normal purview of everyday experience, but it is something that they have to deal with.
Representative England?
Thank you. I don't, all the amendments and everything, I'm struggling to figure out what this bill actually does at this point. So could you explain to me in, what do you envision happening if this becomes law?
Well, the purpose of this bill is to allow local law enforcement to assist federal law enforcement in enforcing immigration laws on the books. So hopefully, like a situation that just happened in Coffee County and things that happened obviously in Florida, which is the name of the bill, Lake and Riley Act, hopefully we can help work with the federal law enforcement on laws that are already on the books. So there's no new laws created here, to make our communities safe and to give law enforcement at every level the tools that they need to cooperate together to make sure that our communities are safe.
So how do you propose local law enforcement enforce federal immigration laws?
Well, they obviously, as the bill points out, they can enter into memorandums of understanding with federal agencies that enforce those, and you know, in the same ways that a federal agency would enforce immigration laws, or would you know, operate in terms of illegal immigrants to make our communities safe. So whatever all of those day-to-day operations are that they're allowed to enter into a memorandum of understanding with, then that's what they would assist with.
Would that then require local law enforcement to detain individuals until, whether you gain information or exchange documents or anything like that, would that require local law enforcement under those MOUs to detain individuals that they believe are here without documentation?
It doesn't require them, but it gives them the ability to do so.
So you've taken out I think one of the amendments that you did, you took out the criminal penalty in the event that this couldn't be done.
That's right.
Also, I struggle because I did miss the last meeting, but I was made aware of some testimony that was made last weekend, or last meeting, about individuals being targeted, and how we have to target specific individuals. And you may be here with the purest of heart, without any intent here. You just want to generally enforce immigration, but then you hand it to somebody like we heard, and what I've read, he said, and it becomes a tool to target individuals. When we create legislation like this that creates that pathway, doesn't that cause you some concern that potentially a whole segment of the population could be targeted as a result of legislation that we pass like this?
Well, the comments that he made were in the context of after a crime had been committed. So it is obviously not anybody's intent in this room, and I think, and I could speak for law enforcement in Alabama, that it is not the desire to target, profile, and treat anybody unjustly. But we have a problem on our hands because of our border situation and immigration that's out of control. And so this is a problem and a situation that we didn't ask for, didn't look for, but it's a problem that we have to face nonetheless.
Oftentimes, I think people get confused and assume that our Constitution doesn't protect individuals that don't have documentation. But everybody on our shores, in our country, has a protectable due process right, which is guaranteed by the Constitution. the right to property, liberty, pursuit of happiness. It's all guaranteed. And it's often, we always have our best intentions littered and destroyed by bad actors. And Alabama has quite a unique history of taking legislation, laws, court orders, and so forth, and using them to trample all over people's rights. And unfortunately for me, this particular legislation is just a pathway towards that, because you're going to hand it to the wrong people, and then ultimately we're going to be just inundated with lawsuits because somebody forgot that the Constitution protects every individual that they come in contact with. And, it's interesting, even in Texas as we speak, they've got similar legislation like this. And after, as wild as the Fifth Circuit is, and as a true border state like Texas, their main Solicitor General looked at their legislation and said, we probably have gone too far. And I think with this legislation, we're headed down that same pathway. And it's interesting, this is not our first foray into this. I'm pretty sure Scott Beeson is at his house right now singing songs about how the Spirit has returned. But I hope our better angels intervene and we figure out a better way to handle what you believe we have a problem with. And that's all I have.
Okay. Representative Jackson.
Yes, thank you. I just want to go back to the issue of language. And the reason why I used Spanish, because you brought it up, southern border. I don't know how many Chinese-speaking people in Alabama, or Taiwanese, Japanese-speaking, but the problem that we are facing right now is the incident that's happening on the southern border, and everybody think about what denigrating those people are coming across the border doing all this, but they are, when they come into this nation, they are people. They're not animals. They are people, and we got to treat them as such. And to piggyback on what my colleague said, the Constitution provides that. So, in order to do what's right and what's fair and what's just, we must look at them as who they are, people, fellow human beings, brothers and sisters, and treat them as we would want to be treated. That's all I'm saying. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right, you've heard the amendments. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the amendments. A motion by Representative Fedler. All in favor of adopting the amendments, indicate by saying aye. Aye. All right, now the bill is before us as amended. There have been a number of issues have been raised. I'm going to go ahead and put this bill into a subcommittee to be worked on over the next week because I need those issues addressed by you as the sponsor. And I need you to work with the county, the cities, and the sheriff's department on some issues. That will be in public safety subcommittee. Representative Shane Stringer will chair that, and if y'all will get that back as soon as you can, let me know. So the bill is amended. It's going in the subcommittee, and if you'll get those amendments incorporated in the bill, so when it comes back before this committee, we'll address those. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
That will bring us to our next piece of legislation. I'm sorry, wait a minute. Representative Wadsworth, did you have any comments before we finish? Move on?
I wanted to make a comment about the interpreting. I agree with Representative Jackson that we need an interpreter. However, in rural Alabama, you don't always have qualified or certified interpreters. And I think part of this subcommittee should address the issue of getting a interpreter that may not be certified, but as long as somebody who can communicate with that person. And I think if you do it that way, then most people are going to have somebody that can communicate with them that does speak English too. Okay.
All right, thank you. That brings us to House Bill 21. Representative Faulkner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, I'm bringing this bill for the purpose of allowing our law enforcement to continue to use computer voice stress analysis in their hiring decisions. This is not something that is allowed in court. This bill doesn't change that. This simply allows our law enforcement, and you see, I want to recognize certainly one of my chiefs of police over here, Jay Loggins, that brought this to my attention. These members of law enforcement that are here, there are many departments across this state that use this, again, not for purposes of court. This is in their hiring decisions, and they want to be able to continue to use that due to our old law that was really in place before this technology was around. If you read the law as it was written, it would, according to the AG, not allow this. The AG helped us in saying, hey, this is how you can do this and would be good for law enforcement. And this is how LSA drafted the bill. The bill makes technical revisions to the law, but in essence is being brought to specify that a polygraph device does not include equipment or devices used for the purpose of computer voice stress analysis. And this is very important to our law enforcement so they can continue hiring. They've got investments in this already, and they've got people who do this, and a lot of resources and time invested in this. And so that's the purpose of the bill, and it is time sensitive. And I appreciate, Mr. Chairman, you getting this up so quickly.
All right, Representative Bolton, then Representative Wadsworth, and then Stringer.
Sure. Representative Faulkner, I thank you for bringing this. Work with these people that run these for 20 years when they first hit the scene. They've been very helpful. I'd like to also thank my Chief Gerald Burton, his personnel, Lieutenant Mark Glenn, and Chief Keith Carpenter for coming down and exhibiting an interest in this bill to make sure that we keep them legal as they do their background investigations on hiring folks.
Thank you, Representative Bolton.
Representative Wadsworth.
Yeah, I was just gonna say at appropriate time to move for favor.
Okay. We'll do that at the appropriate time. Representative Stringer and then Representative Pettis. No? Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to also reiterate that, and thank you for bringing this bill. It's something that's needed in law enforcement, and I thank you for it.
Well, and thank you, many of our law enforcement, I don't know if I got around to everybody, but I tried to get, and I appreciate y'all co-sponsoring the bill. Y'all are co-sponsors on this, and I can't thank you enough. Okay. And for our law enforcement, thank you for what you do, and for bringing this to our attention.
Okay. Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For us who are not in law enforcement, could you give me a little more explanation of what you just got to say?
Reverend, yeah, and I'm not in law enforcement either, but love our men in blue and the sacrifice they make to keep us safe, as I know you do.
Yes.
But yeah, it's just to allow them to continue using computer voice stress analysis in their hiring process.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
All right, I got a motion for favor report. Representative Wadsworth, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All in favor. All opposed, the same. Ayes have it. Your bill has a favorable report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members.
You had a much easier route to go, Mr. Faulkner, than I did when I brought this bill years ago. I don't know what you've done, but maybe being a lawyer or something. All right, that brings us to our final bill, Representative House Bill 389, Representative Stringer.
Yes, sir. Chairman, if it's okay, I'll carry that from here.
Yes, sir.
All right, this bill just addresses the MCC codes that is starting to take place across the country, which is where they're putting the categories on gun purchases and ammunition purchases across the country. This is just going to prohibit credit card companies and financial institutions from using this. There's 13 states that already have this, and there's probably 4 or either 5 other states that are carrying this bill now. And so far, it's passed in these states bipartisan.
Okay. I've got a motion for favor report. Any questions? All right, Representative England and Representative Bedsole.
I think I see what you're trying to do, but the only thing that I'm concerned about is I want to make sure that, local institutions, credit cards, whatever, that have these transactions, know that they are, if there's a lawful order that comes from a judge pursuant to some sort of search warrant or something like that, that they are required to respond. I don't want to. I mean, this sucks. You're like behind me, so I don't know. I don't know who. Like I'm talking to myself. But I don't think you want to do that either, because you don't want to impede like an actual criminal investigation into someone's who may be illegally dealing in firearms or using a local institution to hide the transaction, so they could hide also what they're get away from law enforcement in terms of what they're going to do with that firearm or what their plans are. So I'm not going to do anything to try to stall this today, but I may come talk to you later on about some language to kind of clarify that, so
Sure.
they'll know that in the event that a subpoena comes, that they're required to comply with that court order.
Yeah, and I'm not opposed to that, but it is also listed in there that to those facts that they cannot decline if it's a lawful order or if it's an investigation. And then at the very back, it may take me just a second, but it's in here twice to address that, and it's also in here that this does not impede any investigations or lawful orders.
Yeah, and that was actually brought to my attention by some folks who were prosecuting and also law enforcement, because they didn't think it was very clear. So I may bring you something and see if it's okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
All right, Representative Betzel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative String, I have just two. Let me tell you that with the spirit and intent of the bill, I had a chance to share a conversation at the table the other day, and certainly understand and got a little of the history and perspective of what's going on. And so the spirit and intent, I want to make sure there are a couple things. Number one is just sort of a practicality of how this works, because I was just a little unfamiliar with these merchant category codes. Would this, if they use these merchant category codes and I use my Visa credit card, would this decline my transaction at the point of sale, or does it allow the transaction to occur and then holds that data, which then could be used to report that I purchased a firearm, for example?
No, it would still allow the transaction.
Okay, so the transaction wouldn't be, if so, they wouldn't institute the MCC that would shut down that transaction. It would just be for collection of data to be used at a later time?
Correct.
Okay. All right. And I appreciate the clarification. The other piece that that I just want to see what we can do here is I have one specific local bank in my community that is locally owned and operated, been in the same family for years. But as I understand the definition of financial institution, it would hold them certain liable for using these MCCs. But as I pulled out, just to verify earlier, when I looked at my debit card from that institution, it is a Visa debit card. So they use a third-party company, Visa in this case, to do the transaction. Is there an opportunity here where we could help our local banks? Because as I understand that process, and I did speak with the bank president, it's a very manual process that is dictated by individuals that have to be, every time there's a software update, these MCCs don't carry over, so they have to ensure that they're there. So in other words, if they took out that MCC now, today, because they said this is the right thing to do, and I don't think that they are collecting it in this particular case, but a future software upgrade, if it does not get checked boxed again or stricken from it, it could actually be used inadvertently, which would subject them to, I think, a $10,000 fine. So I would love to see if there's something we could do, especially for our local small institutions, to any kind of language or that would keep this where this is being collected, which is at the Visa, MasterCard level, the processors, and not our local financial institutions.
Yeah, and I'm not opposed to working on that. We also have something in there that says that if the violation or if that occurs, that they do have 30 days to cure the problem. So it is a clause in there, which is pretty much what every other state that has this put a clause in there that allows somebody to fix this within 30 days to keep from having to pay the penalty.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, and then I entertain a motion for favorable report. Representative Pettis, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same. Ayes have it. Bill has a favorable report. Entertain a motion to adjourn. All right, by Jackson, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Can you get your committee together in my office and bring y'all bro? The attempt is not to kill this bill. The attempt is look at the other states, get it right back up